During the Great Depression, survival wasn't about comfort. It was about ingenuity. Across America, thousands of men known as hobos hit the rails, searching for work, food, and a way to endure the hardest years the country had ever seen. These weren't aimless wanderers. They were resourceful survivors who built an underground system of knowledge, codes, signals, and methods that allowed them to find what they needed in a world that had stopped giving. Today, in an age of abundance that could change in a moment, their lessons are more relevant than ever. Stay with me for the next few minutes, because we're going to break down the scavenging secrets that kept Depression-era hobos alive, and how those same tactics can still serve anyone who values resilience, resourcefulness, and self-reliance. The road became their teacher, and necessity became their rule-book. When the economy collapsed in 1929, jobs vanished overnight. Entire families were displaced, and millions found themselves without homes or money. For many men, the only way forward was on the rails. They travelled light, carrying little more than a bedroll, a tin can, and a good knife. But what they lacked in possessions, they made up for in knowledge. They learned to scavenge in a way that was systematic, respectful, and efficient. A survival code that turned scarcity into opportunity. A hobo didn't just grab what he could. He knew where to look and how to make use of what others overlooked. Rail yards, dumps, and small-town back alleys were treasure troves if you knew how to search. They scoured abandoned farmhouses for canned goods, stripped wire from scrapyards to trade for food, and gathered discarded clothing from wash lines or refuse piles to patch and reuse. But the true genius was in how they processed and preserved what they found. For instance, food was rarely wasted. Canned goods with rusted edges were tested by smell and colour before being cooked over a fire, killing bacteria. Spoiled meat was dried into jerky to stretch its life a few more days. Even bones were boiled down for broth. Modern preppers can take a page from this discipline, learning not just to store food, but to stretch and repurpose it under any circumstance. One of the most fascinating parts of hobo culture was the symbol system they carved into fences, posts, and train stations. These marks weren't random graffiti. They were coded instructions for survival. A simple circle with 2 lines through it meant safe place to sleep. A cat symbol meant kind-hearted woman lives here, often a sign that a meal or odd job might be available. A cross signified, well, good people, help available. On the other hand, a slash through a circle warned, mean dog, or simply stay away. This invisible map stretched across America, allowing hobos to find food and shelter without speaking a word. It was one of the earliest grassroots communication networks, built entirely by scavengers who had nothing but a piece of chalk, or maybe just a nail. Applying that same principle today means thinking about how information and cooperation can, replace pure luck. Survivalists and outdoor adventurers often talk about community intelligence, the shared knowledge of where to find resources, safe shelter, or potential threats. Learning from the Hobo Code, one could develop a modern system for mapping edible plants, clean water sources, or hidden campsites. The method is timeless. Mark what's useful, share what you know, and help others who are trying to survive with integrity. Making something from nothing was honestly a hobo's greatest skill. You know, the Depression stripped people down to essentials, and from that hardship came some truly incredible creativity. Hobos could turn scrap into shelter, trash into tools, and leftovers into meals. A tin can wasn't waste. It was a stove, a pot, or even a lantern. They'd cut small holes near the base of a can to create a draught, then fill it with small twigs, or maybe a bit of coal to make a portable hobo stove. You could cook a full meal with just that, a piece of wire for a handle, and a flat rock as a lid. Even clothes, well, those were scavenged with strategy. Worn-out trousers could be patched with burlap or old flour sacks. A piece of tire inner tube made a belt or, sometimes, a shoe sole. They rarely begged. They worked, traded, or repurposed. One man's trash became another man's toolkit. And if you want to apply that same spirit, start by learning to view waste a bit differently. You know, a broken pot, a torn bag, or even an empty tin isn't just garbage. It's potential, plain and simple. With a bit of know-how, you can make a waterproof container from waxed cardboard, a lantern from an oil-soaked rag, or even a fishing line from some frayed thread. These aren't museum skills. They're survival skills that can actually keep you fed and warm when, well, modern comforts disappear. The most misunderstood part of hobo life, honestly, is the discipline it required. They had a code of ethics called the Hobo Code, and one of its key tenets was, take only what you need and leave the rest for the next traveller. Scavenging wasn't looting. It was sustainability before that word even existed, really. Hobos understood that burning bridges or stealing meant isolation, and, well, isolation meant death. They also practiced gratitude. A meal earned through honest labour, chopping wood, fixing a fence or cleaning a yard, was respected far more than anything taken by force. That sort of mindset, you see, forged a culture of mutual aid. If one hobo found a good water source, he'd leave a sign for others, and if he had extra food, he'd share it at the next campfire. That's just how it was. Modern survivalists and homesteaders can learn from that ethic. When you scavenge, whether it's reclaiming materials, foraging plants, or using old parts for repair, do it sustainably. Take only what you need, leave things better than you found them, and share what you know. Survival is not just about staying alive. It's about staying human while doing it. When you strip away the myths, the Depression-era hobo represents one of the purest forms of survivalism in history. No gadgets, no gear stores, no online tutorials, just hard-earned wisdom and adaptability. These men learned to live lightly, travel smart, and think ahead. They were scavengers, yes, but they were also craftsmen, navigators, and quiet philosophers of endurance. Their resourcefulness created a blueprint that still applies today. If you can cook with minimal tools, mend your clothes, trade labour for food, and navigate by signs or instinct, you're carrying their legacy forward. Every empty lot, abandoned building, or roadside ditch that provided shelter for them is a lesson in resilience and self-sufficiency. And perhaps the greatest takeaway is this. Surviving hard times isn't just about stockpiling. It's about staying adaptable, creative and decent. Hobos didn't have much, but they had freedom, fellowship, and the ability to turn hardship into skill. The hobo way of life may have faded, but the mindset they carried remains vital for anyone who values independence and ingenuity. Whether you're into history, bushcraft, or modern prepping, their lessons are more than relics. They're strategies for endurance in uncertain times. Learn to scavenge wisely, create efficiently, and live with gratitude for every scrap of sustenance that comes your way. If this deep dive into Depression-era survival has given you something to think about, make sure to subscribe to Backyard Wisdom for more forgotten techniques that still matter today. Share this video with someone who appreciates real history and hands-on resilience, because the best survival lessons aren't found in new gadgets, but in the old truths that got our ancestors through the worst of times.